Hello, I'm Skippy Mesereau, coach, former elected official, and lifelong public servant. Welcome to Healing Our Politics, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. This is a Healing Our Politics episode-LETTE, an ultra-focused, super condensed new format, just 15 minutes with leaders just like yourself, designed to showcase your good work and introduce you to our audience and our audience to each other. Consider these episodes the appetizer, the amuse-bouche to the Healing Our Politics meal. If you like the taste, slip into our DMs on Instagram, email us through the website, or leave a comment below, and we will use your feedback to determine who gets brought back for the full deep dive, the tasting menu experience on a future Healing Our Politics episode. So sit back, relax, and pay attention because this one is coming at you fast. I figured out technology. It only takes me every time to revisit.
Me too. We're in it together, Skippy. It's nice to see you.
So good to see you, Allison. Welcome to the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you, literally you and everyone else watching, the heart-centered leaders, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. I have been very excited about this since we initially connected on a democracy call, of course, of all places, because the intersection of religion and progress and conflict have fascinated me for a long time. So before we dive in, could you give us just like a very brief intro about you, your background, kind of what's on your heart and how you've chosen to serve in this world?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. Super excited to be here. I'm Allison Ralph. I'm a Christian history nerd for the same interest that you just said. It was like fascinating. My PhD focused on how Christian societies, but also Roman late antiquity, Roman Empire societies managed or failed to manage their own internal diversity. Turns out to be very salient for today. So I used to be at the Aspen Institute Religion and Society program, and now I run a consulting firm, Cohesion Strategy, where mostly I help nonprofits successfully invite more types of folks into their own work, like expand what's possible.
Beautiful. So at the risk of starting out like very boring, so we're all on the same page, can you define both religion, but then also that second thing you said, internal diversity? Like, what does that mean?
Okay, so let me start with the religion. It's super hard to define. Religion scholars argue over it all the time. There are two frameworks I think are super helpful. There's one developed by Ben Marcus. It's called the 3Bs framework, and it's belief, behavior, and belonging, and the constellation of those that shape just about everything about our lives, but also what we fit under that rubric and that we might call religion, which is super, super diverse.
Right, because you could think of like you could think of our community program, right? Like the Pride as something that has a set of beliefs about what democracy could be, a set of behaviors of how we speak to and interact with each other, and then what we do with it. You could think about cults. You could think about the companies, right? So interesting.
Yeah, totally. And you can fit things in there that have a divine presence or that don't. It's just I think it's a great framework. And one of the things that I love about the belonging piece of that is that it helps us think about how we're connected, not just to our communities right now, the worship service with you, but also how we're connected to people over time. So every Christian today is connected to Christ and to every Christian and every Christian in the future. Like, that's an incredible community. Same thing for any person of any other faith that has an ongoing community. It's really, really powerful to be part of something that is that big and that, so influential in society. It's just amazing to be part of that big. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Internal
diversity.
Say again?
Internal diversity. What does that mean?
Yeah, internal diversity. So let me take the Catholic Church as an example. Catholic Church is really, really big. They have a certain set of beliefs and orthodoxy, a set of behaviors that are appropriate. But inside that, the internal diversity, it stretches across the globe. globe. It stretches across every race, stretches across, you can be any person from anywhere and be part of that community. And even though there is a certain set of defined doctrine, there's actually a ton of diversity around inside that doctrine. And the church, as much as it appears to avoid conflict sometimes, actually leans into internal discussion. So there's just one example of what has incredible internal diversity in one community, even that has a pretty relatively clearly defined structure of what's included. And every religious community is internal. Even communities that seem super homogenous, there's always diversity. People are people. We have different ways of being, or different genders, or different ages. You know, we like chocolate or vanilla or whatever. Like, we are different individuals. So there's always some internal diversity. And then that always leads to the question of, like, okay, well, how do you your internal diversity as a society?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And so if we kind of zoom into today, and, you know, although religions are a cross-national organizational structure, the primary organizational structures that determine our lives are nation states, right? The countries that we live in. And what was it? It was behaviors, beliefs. What was the third?
Belonging.
And belonging. So relative to, let's say, the American experience today, where there's this sort of ongoing argument about what are our core beliefs, who does or doesn't belong. I imagine in your studies you come across these same tensions within religions, but can you talk a little bit about kind of the relationship between, you know, the religion or the organizing structure, this relationship to internal diversity, this openness or closeness of society, and sort of the impact that has on things like progress or conflict?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say that progress is a value judgment.
Totally.
So I'll hang on to that one for a second. Openness and closedness. So I'll say, like, there's no one-to-one relationship between religion being more open or more closed. It's just how does society, and to what are we open and to what are we closed? And there are two kind of frames that have shaped most societies in one way or another, both at the same time in different ways. Yeah, and they're still working on it. And one is hierarchy, and the other one is purity. And so both of those have different ways of managing diversity, and they both have great things about them, and they both have things that are really hard and hurtful. And they're still playing out. So let me start with hierarchy. Hierarchy, and I just gave an example of the Roman Church. You can have a critical amount of diversity within a church or within a society, as long as the hierarchical structure is. And within that, you can actually be pretty much whoever you want. And let me actually give a bigger example of the Roman Empire in late antiquity. Incredibly giant empire, contains thousands of different ethnicities, languages, provinces, ways of being, religions, all of this stuff. But everybody in that empire had a role. And the empire wanted everyone to have a role and to have a place. And whatever your role was, whether it's foot soldier or farmer or whatever, as long as you are doing your thing, they do not give anything for what else you do.
Is that because they want you to be of service to the whole, like they're looking for your labor, or because the act of your participation is a bulwark against conflict, that you're bought into the idea, and so you're bought into the unity of the power structure?
I love this question. It's both. It's both, because you do fulfill the role, the individual role. I'm going to move my mic a little bit. I'm not. I might be a wiggly, but maybe I don't solve the issues. So you do fulfill the actual role. Like the Roman Empire needs farmers, right? And also, they consider that hierarchy divinely inspired. And so as long as you are, continuing to live within that hierarchy, you're continuing to live within that divinely inspired hierarchy. And by the way, it's also considered to be God that installs the emperor, right? So if you're sort of pushing against that hierarchy, you're pushing against the empire itself. And that threatens the whole social order. But again, as long as you do your role, whether or not you like it, mind you, you can also be whoever you want, practice whatever religion you want. You can be wherever you're from, speak whatever language, whatever. We don't care. Do your role. So there's an incredible amount of diversity that's allowed in that situation. The other framework is purity. And purity has the ability to collapse hierarchy, which it can be incredibly freeing, like to just dump all of that hierarchy crap and really flatten the society and go for lay leadership and all of this wonderful stuff. And the way that it manages diversity is to say, well, we're going to have some very central rules about who we are and how we live our lives. And these can be anything. There's a bajillion different constellations of how you can set these things up. And if you don't follow those rules, then you're out. Full stop. So in a hierarchy, if you are not following the rules, what they're going to try to do is basically punish or coerce you because they want you in society. They want to get you back in. And they're going to go through this like, well, how do we get you back in before they kick you out or kill you? In a purity culture, it's dangerous for the rest of society to have somebody who is sinning or not following the rules. It can actually contaminate the whole thing. So they just get rid of you, full stop. So
this is just a curiosity, but is there any society, has there been a society that is actually structured on freedom? Not the illusion of freedom, not the message of freedom, but truly you can do what you choose. And there's got to be some limitations, of course, right? Because, murdering everyone's not going to work out great. But are there examples of that in history that you think of as truly freedom oriented?
This is what they say about classical liberalism. They say it's the worst thing out there in terms of government, but it's better than everything else.
Right. Yeah. That's a Churchill quote, right?
Yeah. Yes. So, classical liberalism is a system that tries to balance everyone's freedoms, the ideal version of it. Obviously, no human society has actually managed it. There are, I guess John Powell might argue with me on this, there are a few very small societies that have gotten better at who manage their societies in a more flat way without super strict purity boundaries. But honestly, they're pretty small and they don't stand up well to a lot of outside influence. They just don't.
Yeah, interesting. So I have a question, which is one of our listeners noted that the first few minutes there were some mic issues.
Yeah.
So would you be able to stay on for a few extra minutes and kind of
Sure.
back to those 15?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to slip on my earbuds here.
As I drop my phone. All right, let's see if that works.
Okay, we'll try this.
What I am curious about, we are in, you talk about outside forces, inside forces. We are in this moment of incredible change, incredible flux and uncertainty, technological change, workforce change, geographic change, people moving at a higher rate than ever before, not just technological, but communications technology. And in my limited knowledge of history, the thing that I go back to is the last really, really major technological and communications shakeup is Gutenberg and the printing press in 1450.
Yeah.
And then, in today's world, this might be like a YouTube post away, right? But in 1517, Martin Luther hangs the 95 Theses, and what follows is centuries of holy war, which in some ways, at least in my layman's point of view, are like the battle over what is truth and what is structure.
Yeah.
And I find that we're almost in this hyperactive revisiting of that moment. And I'm curious if you could tell a little bit about that history and offer a little color on what that might teach us about how we can navigate our world today with less violence, with less war, with less human tragedy as we navigate this period?
Geez, Skippy, easy questions over here. Just love me a softball. I love that you bring up the Gutenberg Bible and the Gutenberg Press rather, and Martin Luther, because that it was a moment where we see how the shifts in communication technology suddenly allowed for ideas that had actually been circulating for about 300 years at that point. Martin Luther, Zwingli, John Calvin, these folks were not the first ones to have criticisms for how the Catholic Church was handling things, the hierarchy was handling things. But they're suddenly doing that in an environment where you can print a new book with new words in it and get it out within a few weeks or months instead of years, frankly, to handwrite one. So that's, and it did completely overhaul society. Although I would say it wasn't actually, I wouldn't call it holy war. I think it's just a war over power. The Catholic Church, all of the empires, the governments at the time, they're just fighting over power and alliances. So it's not, I don't think that this is a religion thing, actually, necessarily. I think this is a people and power thing, inflected by religion, as most everything else is. And it's not a great precedent, I would say, for how humans manage the crisis of the conflict of worlds, which is where conflict of worlds and worldviews and ways of being, which is where we are again today.
What does the conflict of worlds mean to you?
Sort of conflicts of whole ways of being. So one way is like to say a cultural conflict. And we're dealing with cultural conflict within the U.S. We're also dealing with cultural conflict in a globalized environment where we're trying to manage relationships all the way across the globe and within our own communities. It's a lot. So, we don't have great histories of how humans manage this kind of change. I will say that people fight over belonging, and we fight over, which is certainly happening right now, and we fight over resources. And we fight over belonging in large part because we're fighting over resources, and we're stronger when there's more of us together. And so I think it's helpful when we engage in the world around us from a mindset of abundance. And I don't mean that just that as individuals, but as leaders and as societies. And so if we are able to approach our thinking about our situations, whether it's personal or communal, that we have enough, and we start from there instead of from a scarcity mindset, that is when we are able to work together. Yeah. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. There's one way folks have tried to sort of enforce this. Okay, we're all going to get together and share our resources. It's in a top-down way. That's called communism, and it fails, unfortunately, pretty terribly in really horrendous ways. But there's also been lots of examples where communities have looked around them and said, we could be more successful together if we pooled our resources and created communal resources. One great example of that is early medieval and medieval Netherlands, where there's a community living in basically the swamp. It's just, very watery, very little arable land, hard to survive. And what did they do? They looked with their neighbors, and they saw that they could work together collectively to literally change the land around them, to build levees, to, fill in swampy areas and create shared and common arable land. And the Netherlands is the birthplace of liberalism, of classical liberalism. That's where we get that from, those sets of ideas from.
That experience of shared work.
Yes, absolutely. And it wasn't top down. That's not like village leaders came around and said, you all have to work together.
Yeah.
They just
emergent.
realized. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I'll ask you one kind of closing question just to maybe whet people's appetite a little bit, because I would love to spend another hour here. But could you find or locate an example for us in history of it could be a country, it could be a religious organization, what have you, that was kind of stuck in this scarcity conflict mindset, and then a leader came along who injected an abundance mindset, and what that might have looked like in real terms, so we might imagine the leader that we would seek?
Oh, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind. As he looked around him and he said, we're a powerful community, all of us, and we can build something greater together, not just the community of Black Americans, but as more and more as he leaned into his career, it was about all Americans. So yeah, absolutely. There are ways to look around us and say, you know what, we are not bounded by the worries that we are beset by as humans. We're sort of constitutionally built to be worried about whether or not we have enough.
Yeah.
We're built that way.
Yeah.
And we can lean into understanding what we have more of. And there are regular spiritual practices, by the way, that can help us lean into that understanding, which is the basic one is gratitude. Even if you're not a religious person, performing acts of gratitude every single day is an incredibly powerful way to remember that we have so much. We all have so much. We have more than we need. And then how do we shift into, as an individual and as a community, of leaning into understanding that we really do have enough, and how do we work together so that we can share it, and to create more. Like it's not a single pie. We don't just cut it up and then we're done. Like we build more together, and that's so lovely.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap this back into something specific. And for those listening, I would just say that act of or practice of gratitude is not just an external practice. I have a one-to-one client who I've worked with, who has dedicated their life to the environment and the planet, but as a ultra perfectionist was their absolute toughest critic. And the gratitude practice that we had was like 3 unique compliments each day to self that were true. And we did that for months until this person really started to see themselves as someone that they loved and had gratitude and appreciation for. And that allowed them to show up so differently in their work, because the truth is we can only extend gratitude or kindness to others to the degree to which we extend it to ourselves. And it shifted the way that person was able to show up in their work and thus be more effective in their mission. So I think that's a beautiful place to end for now. If you guys want to see more of Allison on a future podcast, let us know. Let us know what topics you might want to dive into more. I know there's a lot that I'm curious about. Allison, I always ask the same question to close. But before I do, where can people find you if they wanted to work with you at Cohesion Strategies or otherwise? Like, where can we find you?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Cohesionstrategy.com is the website. You can find me on LinkedIn under my personal name or the Cohesion Strategy name. I'm around.
Beautiful. And then the closing question, everyone gets the same one, is our audience, the people listening right now, these are not passive observers. They are the as Teddy Roosevelt would have said, the humans in the arena. So if you were to leave them with just one thing, one practice, one story, one insight, one tool, that could be a book, anything that would best resource them to be a vector for healing our politics, what would you leave them with?
I've forgotten where this quote comes from, so I apologize. But do something every day that scares you.
Amen to that. Yeah, beautiful. Allison, thank you so much for spending your most valuable non-renewable resource with us this morning. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for spending time with us.
It's going to be great to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to put what you've heard here today into practice, sign up for our newsletter, The Leader's Handbook. where each month you'll receive just one email with a curated selection of the most useful tools and practices discussed on this podcast today and over the course of the last month, delivered in simple how-to worksheets, videos, and audio guides, so you and your teams can try and test these out in your own life and see what best serves you. And lastly, if you want to be a vector for healing our politics, if you want to do your part, take out your phone right now and share this podcast with 5 colleagues you care about. Send a simple text, drop a line, and leave the ball in their court. Because the truth is, the more those around you do their work, the better it will show up in your life, in your community, and in your world. Have a beautiful day. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first leading and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a hashtag political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code hashtag political healer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code hashtag political healer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today.